yeah, when people say, what do you do? Instead of saying, I'm a bookkeeper, say, I run a bookkeeping business. It's a subtle difference, but it's actually a really big shift in mindset that you're now identifying as a business owner rather than identifying through what's the work of the business.
You're listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with your host, Michael Palmer. Listen each week as inspiring guests share their secrets of success to help you increase your confidence, work smarter, and build a business you love. This episode of The Successful Bookkeeper is brought to you by PureBookkeeping.com, the proven system to grow your bookkeeping business.
Welcome back to the Successful Bookkeeper podcast. I'm your host, Michael Palmer, and today's show is going to be another fantastic episode with a guest who has been on the show many times. Recently, we had him on the show talking about the E-Myth Bookkeeper, and we had decided that it would be a great idea. I begged him to be able to go deep into each one of these chapters. And so we are back with Peter Cook. Peter, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you so much. Honored to be back again.
Absolutely. Love having you. And for you, I highly recommend, if you haven't listened to the initial episode in this series, the show notes will have a link to get back to that episode. You'll learn more about Peter. And if you haven't already or don't know Peter, you can do that. And today, I was hoping that we could jump back in and go deep. What we're going to do is we're going to jump deep into several chapters of the book. And I thought it'd be great to start with the end in mind, which is one of the 7 habits of highly effective people, to think always with the end in mind. And so jumping right to the end of the book, or almost end of the book, is chapter 20, which is the end is exiting, how you exit your bookkeeping business. And so, Peter, tell us about that chapter and what it all means.
Yeah, so we'll kind of dig in a little bit perhaps into the, how you think about the value of a bookkeeping business. But I think it's worth looking at the mindset piece around this and why I love talking to bookkeepers about an exit and how you think about the value of the business is because it forces, when you have that conversation, you're forced to think like an entrepreneur and a business owner rather than, in Michael Gerber's E-Myth language, rather than like the technician or the bookkeeper. So most bookkeepers don't think about their business as an asset that they can sell. And that's definitely true of Debbie. So when I, first started working with Debbie back in 2001, she, like when we talked about her vision, like what she wanted, like her kind of the biggest vision that she had was that she could replace her husband Neil's income. Neil didn't love his job, and what Debbie wanted to do was earn enough money that she could replace Neil's income and Neil could retire. And the idea that she actually had something that she was growing something to sell hadn't even crossed her mind. And so eventually, and her vision was to replace Neil's income in, I think when we did it was in 8 years. And it's funny, she tells a story about how she failed in that vision, that it didn't happen in 8 years. In 8 years, she'd only replaced half his income, and then in 10 years, she'd replaced his income, and Neil could retire. And then it was probably 14 years after we started that she sold her business and sold it for a significant 6-figure sum. But to do that, like she had to earlier, like you were talking about, we had to start with the end in mind, and we had to actually talk about building something that she could one day sell.
Mm. When you started having those types of conversations, so like with someone who's, that's their vision, and you're starting to say, open that up, making it bigger.
Yep.
What was how did she deal with that?
One of the things I love about working with Debbie is she is really open. Like like you and I have both done a lot of coaching, and there are some people who are just open to coaching, and Debbie, who are a great coaching client. So Debbie was always one of those people. She's always kind of willing to be stretched and willing to think a different way, and so there's kind of often this journey where at first it feels a little daunting and foreign, but then she really embraces it, and then kind of loved the idea, and eventually got there too. Like, it was cool. She had a business, and one of the other things that kind of entrepreneurs think about is a business that runs without you. So when, like, one of the differences that when you think you talk to people who are kind of in business and it's as a job, like if people who are, so bookkeepers who are in business doing bookkeeping, they're thinking about the work. Whereas you talk to business owners, they're often talking about how do you get the business to run and pull themselves out of it, or how do you exit a business? They're much more entrepreneurial or business owner questions than they are, or conversations, than technician conversations. And so Debbie did both of those things. She got her business to a point where she had 12 bookkeepers working in it, and she was only working a day a week in that business, doing a little bit of the sales and none of the bookkeeping. And then got to a point where it sold. And one of the things for the listeners, and one of the things I recommend as a little entryway into this kind of new mindset of thinking about yourself as a business owner instead of as a bookkeeper, is how you answer the question, what do you do? So this is a pretty common, you're at a social event, you're at school pickup, you meet, a networking thing, like it's fairly common in Australia anyway. I assume it's the same in North America.
We don't meet anybody here in North America.
So say that again.
We don't meet anybody here in North America. We just stay in our houses on the computer.
Yes, back when we used to meet people. Yeah, when people say, what do you do? Instead of saying, I'm a bookkeeper, say, I run a bookkeeping business. Yeah. And it's it's a subtle difference, but it's actually a really big shift in mindset, that you're now identifying as a business owner rather than identifying through what's the work of the business. Yeah,
it's fantastic. And I would even say try on, obviously we want people to know what we're doing, but just try on even saying, I'm a business owner.
Yeah.
And then say a bookkeeping business.
Yep.
Because it's there's one level of, like, we want people to know what we do for potential referrals and all that.
Yep.
People think about that. But this exercise right here is about altering the way you perceive yourself.
Yep.
And that's powerful.
Yeah. James Clear, in Atomic Habits, when he talks about the most powerful way to change a habit is to change your identity, and also actually that part of the aim of, like, Atomic Habits is kind of talking about small habits. Like, that's where the atomic is have a habit that's small enough that you can achieve it. And so he talks about, even if the habit is just going to the gym, like if you set up that habit, eventually your identity becomes somebody who goes to the gym. And there's a difference between being somebody who writes, or your identity is then, I'm an author. And if you can switch, like, once your identity switches, then it's kind of, you've won the game.
Mm-hmm.
I teach I teach meditation, and one of the things that I'm trying to, when I teach meditation, I'm trying to get people to create, not just learn how to meditate, but to create a meditation habit for it to be regular. And that game is kind of won when people go from being I'm somebody who meditates to being I am a meditator. It's now not something I do, it's who I am. And so this is very powerful, like you're talking about when you go, I am a business owner. That's a very different identity than I'm a bookkeeper. And lots of things shift when that happens.
Pretty remarkable piece there. You know, we're thinking of the end in mind, but keyword thinking.
Yeah.
And we're this is really a conversation about them first thinking about that end, but the thinking of it piece. I think that often gets misplaced in the think with the end. It's like, oh, we just jump to the end. Well, I want this and I want that, and but it's this thinking part's very interesting, and it popped up in my head here. Right, just recently heard about the white bear theory or something along I'm not sure exactly what it was called, but the idea being is positive versus negative thought.
Yep.
Don't think about a white bear. You can't not think of a white bear.
Yep.
And so along those same lines, often I think people who aren't that, they are the technician, they're thinking, how can I not think that I'm a technician, or how can I not? And it's just as simple as the language you feed yourself.
Yeah.
In this exercise to put it out. And it's like, oh, you're not going to go in there with, a pair of pliers and a screwdriver and alter your brain wiring. It's just simply the program you're feeding it can make a massive difference. And so Debbie was one that took this on. She was coachable, open, and yet at times you say, she would probably regress and have to get over these bumps around that own thinking. Any good stories of when she was like, I can't do it. It's not, no, there's white bears everywhere. They're coming to eat me.
Well, even launching Pure Bookkeeping, I think was a case of that. So we'd worked together for 10 years in her business, and her business was, at that point, was where she wasn't needed in the business. So the business was running without her. She had 12 bookkeepers in the business. And I said to her, look, the systems that you've built in your business are now the best in the industry. There's nothing else anywhere that's as good as what you've built. You should make that available to other bookkeepers. You should go from running your bookkeeping business to helping other bookkeepers run their bookkeeping businesses. And that was too much.
That's meta.
Yeah, and actually, which was how we're here today, because originally that was just kind of my idea for her, and that was she was still like she was starting to think like an entrepreneur, but not that much like an entrepreneur. And so that the origin story of Pure Bookkeeping is then eventually I said, all right, we'll do it together. And then when it was both of us, there was enough comfort for her to take that leap. But on her own, it was too far.
Right. Wow. Absolutely.
And it might be worth just having a quick look at the model. This is on page 164 about the value of a bookkeeping business.
Yes, let's do it.
So there's obviously, if you're thinking about exiting a bookkeeping business and you're thinking like a business owner, then ideally the point where you exit, you have the value as high as possible. And how I think about the value of, I mean, this is obvious. This is how generally people who are buying businesses value businesses. But how I think about the value of a bookkeeping business or any business is about, and the model for those who are obviously probably most people listening aren't looking at page 164. There's two circles with a little overlap. And so there's a circle on the left which has current profit, and a circle on the right, which has independence from owner. And then the overlap is the value of the business. So we think about the value of a business in terms of the overlap of how profitable it is, what's the current profit, and how independent it is from the owner. So the way to make your business more valuable is make it more profitable. The more profit there is, the more someone will pay. And because an owner is essentially buying future profit. So somebody who's paying for your business is a little bit trying to look into a crystal ball and say, how much profit can I make from this in the future? Then that's going to inform how much I'll pay. But to do that, they look at the current profit and how independent it is from the owner. So if you run a bookkeeping business and you're the only person in it and it's all in your head and all the relationships are yours, then it's obviously very dependent on you. And that lowers the value. Whereas in Debbie's case, where she had a team of 12, she wasn't doing any of the bookkeeping, she was only in there a day a week, that business was very independent from her. And so that makes it more attractive. And the key to both being profitable and independent from you, but particularly from being independent from you, is having great systems. So when the reason that Debbie's business could run without her was she'd developed these systems and put them in her business, which meant she could run it the business would run without her. She only needed to be there a day a week.
And we jumped deep into systems in the previous episode, which again, listener, go back. We won't go deep into what makes that so remarkable. It's certainly exciting. I can never step over that. It's exciting when you think that just the concept of solve a problem with a system, if we're thinking arm's length, often what's tying up most business owners every single day are problems.
Yeah.
If those problems aren't solved, then the likelihood of ever removing yourself from that business is very rare, and it's friction. It stalls out progress, which decreases the value.
Yep.
So we have now the model and why it's so important. Why would you say? And I think it's changed. Like if we think about the last 20 years, let's say 15 years around the time Debbie sold her business, people are thinking about the buying and selling of business. You hear more often people selling businesses, but back then it wasn't common. It was like most businesses, even 5-6 years ago, people just retired out of business and let their clients know to go find somebody else. They did not even attempt to harness the value of those assets and what they've built all those years. And such a change. What was your thinking around it back then with Debbie in proving the value of the bookkeeping business?
In a way, it was a kind of happy side effect of helping get Debbie out of the business. So there was a piece which was, okay, like at some point, like let's get the business ready so that you can sell it at some point. But the main thing we were trying to do was firstly put systems in place so that we could have other bookkeepers do consistent work. And then we put systems in place around marketing and sales and HR so that we could get Debbie out of the business. And then it wasn't the intent of that to grow the value, but the very happy side effect of that was all of that work made the business more and more valuable. And so then when we got to the point when Debbie was ready to sell it, then there was a significant 6-figure sum that was almost a bonus.
Wow. And exciting. I'm sure our listener is excited about the opportunity. You've coached a lot of bookkeepers throughout the years. What in your story, like what are some of the thoughts around moving somebody to that? Like there's Debbie, very coachable,
Yep.
but this high idea, if you place this onto somebody, what are going to be the challenges for them?
It's interesting. So the first, often people say, I love bookkeeping. I don't want to give up being a bookkeeper. And this was a conversation that I had with Debbie actually in her business too, like at the point probably when we had about 8 bookkeepers and the turnover was about $500,000. And I said, all right, it's time for you to give up your last clients. You're worth more to the business doing all the other bits than doing the bookkeeping. And we have a whole lot of other great bookkeepers who can do the bookkeeping as well as you. It's time for you to stop bookkeeping. And Debbie said, but I really enjoy bookkeeping. And I said, okay, fine. There's lots of charities that need a bookkeeper. There's lots of places you can volunteer and do bookkeeping. If you love it, go and do it in your own time. But that's not your best. But don't do it in the business. Like that's not your best contribution to the business. And it turns out she didn't love it that much after all. She never went and did it anywhere else, and even stopped doing it in her own business. But I think that's one of the in that change of that identity from a bookkeeper to a business owner, like actually kind of giving up but actually I'm a bookkeeper first and foremost, and also you don't need to give that up.
So true, and I would imagine it's kind of like along that same lines of that thinking. Once the thinking alters, the world changes, right? It's like she could not even see the world with her not doing the books. Oh no, I love this and I want to do it. But when it actually, this is possible, the world has changed.
And another one is, but I'd never want to stop doing this. Like I'd never want to, I love my clients, I love the business. And one of the things, because we run an exercise about planning the exit of your business, where we say, all right, well, when do you think you might want to exit your business and how much do you want it to be worth? And it's that's a confronting exercise to say, okay, in 10 years, I want my business to be worth $1 million. And even if it's just a mind experiment, like how we do that is say, okay, you're not going to have to sell it then. But having a business that's worth that means it's making more profit and it's less reliant on you. And that's a good thing whether you sell it or not. But thinking like an entrepreneur, even if we're not actually going to sell a business, thinking like you want to set the business up so you could sell it means you get more freedom, more time, more money, less stress, like all of the good things you want. And often the reasons you got into business, you get from acting more like a business owner than a bookkeeper and setting up your business so that it could sell, even if you don't. Just having the choice is better than not having the choice.
Such an interesting concept, and to just think that way leads to a better business, whether you have 5 staff or no staff.
Yeah.
It's a trajectory that who wouldn't want to have a business that others would want to buy?
Yeah. Yeah.
That, that's, put that way, it makes absolute sense. And like Debbie's experience, even if it's resistant for you now, you may get to like that someone would want to buy your business.
Yes. I remember selling, we sold a house, like the first house that my wife and I owned together. And then when we sold that and when we got ready to sell, like we did like all these things to sell it. So we painted it, we changed the curtains, like just cosmetic things, but we did all these things. And then we kind of looked around and went, why didn't we do this earlier? This is so much nicer now, but we'd only did it to sell it, not to live in it.
So funny. The mind is crazy.
Yeah.
So we've talked about, great reasons to think with the end in mind, really think with the end in mind, and do that thinking. And what a great opportunity to have a business that could be sold. Great book out there called Built to Sell as well. Highly recommended reading as well, and great title.
Yep.
But now, how do we value what the business is worth? We talked about the arm's length from the owner of the business, but is there the math that goes into what this business can be worth? The valuation.
Yeah. So you kind of look at whatever your local market, what businesses are selling for, and there's generally a range. And this is getting a little bit technical now, but generally people are paying a multiple of EBIT for a business. So EBIT is just a kind of earnings before interest and tax. I don't know why whenever people talk about business valuations, no one actually talks about profit, because all that is profit. But people talk about multiples of EBIT. That's the language. If you talk to a business broker, that's what they'll talk about. They're just talking about profit. So it's a multiple of profit. And so if your business is making $100,000 profit, then you will sell it for a multiple of that. And that might be 4 times that, or 5 times that, or 3 times, depending on a couple of things, depending on kind of the industry and the attractive and the market at the time and what else is available, but also how independent it is from you. So the more independent it is from you, generally the higher the multiple that you can sell it for.
Mm-hmm. And very interesting. I would imagine customer base might be interesting to think about as well. Who are those customers?
Yep.
Are they valuable to another firm? Something like along those lines.
Yep.
So if our listener is obviously read this chapter in the book, you can go to thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com/emyth, get a great promo on getting this book. A bunch of goodies that you can get there as well to help you start take some of this philosophies on with you. But with that, they're reading this. Any suggestions or tips around how to think with the end in mind and getting this business to be ready for them, whether it's something they're going to sell or have a business that could be sold that provides them an income like Debbie had before she sold it. That was such a fantastic outcome from her. She could have kept that business and worked a day a week and for decades.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the most important bit is the bit that we're talking about, is making the decision now that you're a business owner, not a bookkeeper, and what you're doing with your business is creating a business that could be sold. And then the next bit I'd do is be patient. So somebody much smarter than me once said that we always underestimate what we can do in a day, and we overestimate what we can do in a day, and we underestimate what we can do in a decade. And
Wow.
So if we play the long game, so if we're going, okay, this is in 5 years or 10 years, that's what I want to achieve. If you just start thinking about that now, and when you talked about how do you solve a problem, like when things come up, if you just think to yourself, all right, how do I, what's the system, or how can I solve this problem like a business owner? How can I solve this problem in a way that makes it more attractive for somebody at some point to buy it, or easier for me to exit? And the answer to that's a system. How do you solve that with putting a system in place? That'll help. And of course, if people can do a little plug for our own business for Pure Bookkeeping, and what Pure Bookkeeping has done is package together all the systems that Debbie created and improve them and makes that available. So that's, if you're interested in systems, that's something that you can have a look at too, is jump on purebookkeeping.com and have a look at that's what we do, is essentially help people put systems in their business.
Yeah, accelerate to that point where you can have the business running like a system-driven business.
Yep. So absolutely, I hope that's all right, Michael, to sneak in a little plug like that for my business.
We will allow it. We'll allow it. I think we have to put a warning label, not explicit, but you'll have some warning label. We talk about some things that we can help you with. Wonderful stuff, Peter. And I think out of this episode, we have some great outcomes. People are going to think differently about their business. They're going to start saying, I'm a business owner. Just that is so miraculous what this can just do. We have no idea, listener, what might come tomorrow with just changing the way you think about yourself and what you do. That in itself doesn't always come quickly, but sometimes it can. And it's things like this that might transform that for you. So, Peter, this has been an absolute pleasure. I'm looking forward to diving deep into the next chapter and the next episode that we do. Listener, you'll have to stay tuned to figure out what chapter that's going to be. But Peter, again, I want to thank you for your generosity and coming and sharing all about E-Myth Bookkeeper with us today.
My absolute pleasure. Thanks again for having me.
The pleasure is all ours. And with that, we wrap another episode of the Successful Bookkeeper podcast. To learn more about today's wonderful guest and to get access to all sorts of valuable free business building resources, you can go to thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com/E-Myth, of course. Until next time, goodbye.
You've been listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with Michael Palmer. For more information and to download the resources mentioned in this episode, please visit us at thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Thank you for listening.